Welcome to the Quality Conversation brought to you by Resume Wallet. This show is all about discussing what quality means in the talent acquisition ecosystem. I'm your host, Serge Boudreau, and today I have a special guest, Bradley Clark, who leads talent acquisition for Article and is also the co-founder of Kiora, a really cool texting app in this space. Bradley, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you on.
It's good to see you again, Serge. Nice to be here.
You know, the last time we recorded a podcast together was around 5 years ago. Can you believe that?
No, because I live in a world of everything is just flying by. It seems like it was yesterday. So
Well, think about it. So in 2020, obviously the world was a little bit different. It was the start of the pandemic. Talent
yeah,
acquisition was a little bit all over the place because we were struggling with not enough candidates in some ways, but also depending on what time frame in 2020, either a lot of recruiters were getting laid off or a lot of recruiters were getting hired later in the year.
yeah.
And how many shifts in this, I guess, labor market have we seen since then?
2020 was so wild because there was that
Yeah.
moment where all of a sudden everyone panicked. No one hired, no one did anything. TA got cut all over the place, and then it went wild, and people could not hire TA quick enough. I remember I literally couldn't hire enough at Article, and we ended up converting and training customer care associates into talent acquisition because we couldn't hire them, couldn't hire them in the market, and so we had to like build our own talent because it was just too tight of a market.
It was
So
too
it's been a
tight. I
while.
think 2022 was the market. There was more talent acquisition roles out there than any other roles. It was over 100,000. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah,
And I did some research recently, see like how many talent acquisition roles are actually out there in North America. It's very small. I was actually shocked of how many roles are being hired in talent acquisition like today,
it,
this year.
but what's interesting, it's gone up, and that's one thing.
Yeah.
Like I've kept an eye on the market and just seeing like, hey, what's it look like? And it's way quieter than in the past couple of years, but I have seen it starting to warm up. And it was interesting. Last year, I saw a lot of seat shuffles with CHROs, head of HR,
Totally.
and now we're starting to see some like TA leadership shuffles happening, which means my guess is this is going to be the front end to see a lot more TA roles start rolling out. But I think we're going to see a lot more temporary hires,
Yeah.
contract, not building the big permanent team, a bit more flexibility and scalability. So like TA teams can be a bit more nimble and adjust based on needs.
Well, we're definitely in an employer market.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're in an employer market, there's less roles being hired, which means less recruiters in that sense. But I'm curious of Article. So Article
Yeah.
is a furniture shop that's well known here in Canada. I think it's around the world though. Tell me a little bit more of what Article does.
Yeah, so Article was actually founded by software engineers, not furniture people. So four software engineers decided to found a online first direct to consumer furniture company. We're based here in Vancouver, Canada. However, we sell in North America, but
Yeah.
I'd say 90+% of our sales are actually in the US. And so we're a D2C brand. We did just open our first store here in Vancouver as our first test store.
Hmm.
So we're likely going to expand that and get some more brick and mortar stores out there. But the majority of our sales are through our website. So that's Article in a nutshell, really.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit about your talent acquisition team. How many roles do you hire? What's the
Yeah.
scale of your operations there?
Yeah, so we've got four talent acquisition based in North America, two in Canada, two in the US, work remote. And then I've got one who is a fractional consultant who's based in Vietnam because we actually have our Asian headquarters are in Ho Chi Minh City. Interesting enough, she came from Vancouver and happened to be moving to Vietnam, and so it worked out really well. And so she works for Vietnam hiring. So last year we did about 165 hires for the team,
Okay.
and that's a combination of frontline plus more HQ type kind of skilled roles, everything from software engineers, marketers, creative people, etc.
What's the split? Now, how many would you say are frontline?
It's about a 50-50 split for hiring.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
roughly speaking.
one more difficult for you? Are you finding frontline more difficult than, say, HQ type roles?
They're both difficult for different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, they have different challenges to solve. So for HQ roles, I think there's a skills mismatch.
Mm.
I mean, they call it the great stay. I think that's the new term they're using these days. But a lot of people are hesitant to move, and so people are staying in their jobs. So we're not seeing the same activity in the job market, but the people who are on the job market, their skills don't match the needs of what available jobs are. And so we're seeing a flood of candidates whose skills don't match the actual required skills that we're looking for. And so,
Mm,
and other employers as well. And the other ones is people are a little hesitant to leave their jobs.
yeah.
That's one thing we find. So when we get into the sourcing side of things, people are no, I'm going to wait it out. I'm not sure. Kind of seeing what's going on for the economy, see what's happening. Obviously there's a lot of political changes happening in North America as well. Seeing how that looks like as far as the economy. On the frontline side, volume is a factor. I mean, we just see a flood of applicants, and that's one of the
Mm.
biggest challenges there. But they've got options, and so speed is essential on that side of things because they're on the market and then they're off the market. And so if you're
What's the
not, yeah,
split for you as far as like how many do you source and the ones that are coming through recruitment, marketing, or advertising?
we're primarily inbound, like with the exception of maybe some tech hires. The occasional tech hire or if it's a really senior role, we'll do sourcing for that. But we've really focused on making as much inbound as possible given what the market is. But part of that is, it's not just to have a floodgate. Like we want to have our content strategy and our employer brand reflect who we are and who's going to be successful here. And so we want the inbound to also be a bit like a magnet where it's attracting the right people, but repelling people who won't be happy here. Because as a company, article isn't for everyone. And we want to be really clear about that. And that's okay. Like it's not going to make everyone happy working here.
So even with a message out there, and I love that because it's one of the biggest things that I see in employment, brand, or even in recruitment marketing, is we're trying to sell every widget to everyone compared
Yeah.
to like let's just sell the widgets to the qualified buyer. And if you're very intentional about what the actual lifestyle, what it is to work there, what are the good things and the bad things, it should naturally repel some candidates. But then in a world of AI where a lot of people are applying to multiple jobs with the lazy apply tools that you click once, then it just searches the internet and applies to every job. Do you find that even though it's pretty clear of why or why not you should work that, there you're still getting a flood of applicants?
So we're still getting a flood of applicants. Yeah,
Mm.
I honestly, I think this is the biggest problem we're going to have to solve in the next 5 years. Is going to be there's a quality to quantity, so to speak. When it comes to this, they can just put out all those applications at once, but uh, it's going to be really challenging. And it almost, in a sense, like I kind of aged out from having online dating, but in a sense, this reminds me of people who have online profiles which have all these filters on and they're not representing who they are on both sides. And so it's like, oh, I like hikes and this kind of stuff. I got a filter. I look young and good looking. And they meet in person, you're not the same. And you don't maybe like hikes. And you don't like those things. I feel like both employers and employees are putting on too many filters right now. That's the way I'm kind of thinking around this. And I think it's going to be a really hard problem to solve. And I don't have a lot of answers at this stage.
Well, it's funny you say that because I heard a story on a client meeting this morning that was very similar. We're talking about a gentleman that would travel a lot. So every city he came in, he'd go in Tinder and just swipe left or right, whichever one that you're trying
Yeah.
to connect, thousands of times. And his whole theory was, I'm just going to play the numbers game, right? And I think candidates are approaching exactly in the same way. And I have to blame talent acquisition or companies a little bit for that mentality because they're not going to do the same research as probably we did when we came into the job market, I guess, because we would take some time, research the company, then apply for the job. Now, really, the practice is apply to as many jobs as possible. Someone contacts you, then you research the company and start digging in.
Yeah.
So they're playing the numbers game. And part of it is we've caused that because we have ghosted candidates. We have not responded to them. So they don't feel like if I'm taking all this time to
Yeah.
do research and I hear nothing back, it's not working for them.
And the interesting thing is where you put the friction. And I think this is the challenge to figure out because
Yeah.
we rely on quite a few application like questions, like screening
Yeah.
questions when you apply. Because one, it helps us filter, and so we try to do more intentional questions. The other one is trying to set expectations, and so we want to make sure it's like people are opting in. And so some of the questions are more like, just so you know, this is how we work. Are you okay with this? And if so, yes.
Mm.
However, it's that fine line. If you put too much friction in place, a really great candidate might say, I don't want to go through this process.
Yeah.
And we use a great ATS, so it's not like something where, let's say a Workday or something else, which you have to copy and paste, or SuccessFactors, some of the old dinosaur ones. But still, like we're trying to find that balance between how much effort do we put in, which doesn't repel people who are good because they say, hey, I'm already working. I don't need to fill this stuff out,
Yeah.
versus kind of pushing back and making it harder potentially for the bots to apply on their own. And so we're really trying to figure this out.
I think we've had this discussion before. In the past, we all felt that we should remove all friction in the process, especially when we're in an employee
Yeah.
market. But obviously, that's not working anymore. And the challenge as well is screening questions, they work, and we see the majority of them lying on it. Like, are you
Yeah.
eligible to work in Canada, US? And they say yes, then you're pretty deep until you find out actually you're not.
Yeah. One of the things I found more luck with is multiple choice screen questions. So it's not a simple yes or no.
True. That's a good.
And so when we had the multiple choice ones, and so we'll give options, like let's say we go, hey, do you have e-commerce experience? And instead of saying yes or no, instead it's how much e-commerce experience do you have? Like 0 to 500,000, 500,000 to a million, million to 10 million, 10 million to 50 million. So if we require a certain scale or volume, 0 to, then we might just automatically reject the ones we say, hey, they just haven't worked to the volume we need. And so
Yeah.
it's not laying it out, so they're not gaming that yes or no. And so I find those questions work a bit better, but it's trial and error right now, and I think everyone's trying to figure this out. One of the things we do is we do shut down our roles. We don't leave our roles open the whole time. Like once we get
Right.
enough candidates who are in flight to interview, we actually close those roles down. And the reason for that, like we've been very intentional, and it took a while to explain to hiring managers, but realistically, people are deep in the interview process. We weren't going to actually get a chance to go look at those other candidates who applied. Some of the research is coming out now saying also like the most viable candidates are candidates who are good for the job, who are active on the market, ready to say yes, apply in that first 2 weeks.
Hmm.
They're the candidates who are ready to make that move. And the argument would say, okay, well, let's collect those resumes and go back to them. The problem is they're probably further along in the stage somewhere else. And so you're not even going to get a chance to get them. I would rather shut the job down, go through the batch we have. If that doesn't work out, we reopen and we start again, change the process, change what we learned, treat it much like an agile process rather than just having this unlimited waterfall right to the very end. And especially for us being a consumer brand, is I don't want to set false expectations that you applied on the 11th hour, we're busy getting an offer out, and then someone goes, don't even look at my resume.
Yeah.
And because any candidate we have is a potential customer. And so we really work hard to make sure that our candidates are treated like a customer, because the last thing we have is someone goes, oh, I applied for this job, I got ghosted, never heard back from these guys, and then they're never going to buy from us. And that's the last thing we need.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is a major concern for talent acquisition departments. I think sometimes we fixate too much on our employment brand. But in your case, your employment brand is critical, but your employment brand is so tied to your consumer marketing
Yeah.
brand out there that if they have a bad experience, you ghost them, you don't respond to them, or
Okay.
you give them a bad experience throughout the interview. They're never going to buy from you, and they're going to tell people not to buy from you, which is just a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, we're really protective of that experience. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
perfect, but we really try to constantly hone in. How can we be more transparent? How can we be more fair?
Mm.
One of the challenges we have, which is a little bit different as well, is our employment brand and how we work is very different than our furniture product brand. Our furniture product
Yeah.
brand is very playful and fun, and people assume articles that way. They go, "Oh, I love how your product looks," because our product brand is that way. Article is actually a really serious company, and takes work really serious. We're not that playful. We're not that fun. We have fun people who work here. We're not a fun organization. We're not a celebration organization. We're not a party organization. And the people assume the furniture brand is how we are. And we had this halo, this employment brand halo, which wasn't accurate. So we actually had to work hard to delineate the two, but at the same time also not make people feel alienated to the product brand. So it's been an interesting journey figuring this out.
That's an interesting point because yes, your brand is very playful, really cool, right? I don't think I've seen that too much, that the employment brand and the consumer brand are quite different. So it must be a harder message to communicate. Where in the process do you start talking about that?
I mean, it starts from even the content we share. Our job postings, we try to be really transparent. Like how we work here is very much there's a high level of authority and accountability are the terms we use, and the A and the A have to match. And so we trust people a lot, but the reality is like they're held to high standards. And so like
Mm,
we put that in place from a content standpoint, the stuff we share, from our job postings, from our career site. Like we've really tried to nail that down. Is we take this work really serious. We build fun, cool looking products, but we work hard. We take it serious. We don't take ourselves serious. That's the interesting thing. Like we have really funny people who easygoing, great to work with, all those things. But when we're here, we work, and
mm.
and that's important. It's not always easy to get across, but we're constantly trying to fine tune that messaging there.
Well, you seem to be doing a good job at it. I want to jump into AI a little bit more. And
Yeah.
because obviously there's AI lazy apply, but there's also AI assisted applies, which what I mean is you take in your resume, put in Chat GPT, it enhances it, it makes it better. What's your feelings around that? Like, do you think job seekers should leverage tools like that to make their resume better?
I think it's still too early to say. Again, as a job seeker, I get it. I get why people do it. The solution is more low tech, and we're going to see more applicants. But really, this comes down to is we need to do better interview planning and really thinking through our assessment process. So,
Hmm.
so I think the answer, and what do I need? And when I get people into interviews, I think it's be more in-person interviews, especially on the tech side, and stop assessing on searchable skills because those people use tools. That's not a bad thing if
Yeah,
they're using those tools. But really, I think assessments are going to shift into how you think, how you problem solve, and how you interact with people. And so I think it's going to be more whiteboarding, more problem solving versus what have you done in the past? How would you solve this? Pop quiz type interview questions, it, which I think is good. I think it's a better shift, anyways, because you're actually assessing this person for who they are
absolutely.
and how they think and how they interact versus what do you know, which is searchable and learnable. So I think the
Being
solution is low tech, but it's still it's changing so quickly right now.
Well, I agree. I think exactly what you mentioned is what the future of interviewing is, especially even if you think about deep fakes, right? And software
Yeah,
engineers are the perfect example. We recently had a guest talking about how many situations she's had that the people she interviewed were not the person that actually started the job. And it was a really hard thing to define, especially living in a remote world where a lot of software engineers are. Like, we got to figure out a way how to make sure these people are real. And I don't think there's a way to alleviate it unless we're very personalized in those interviews. We're
a
digging deep, right?
friend of mine works at Google, and that was one of the things they were working really hard to solve.
Really.
Especially because they hire a lot internationally, they move people around the
Yeah.
world. The whole process as well. You interviewed someone 6 months ago. You never met in person. Do you remember who that person was who you interviewed 6 months ago versus the person who shows up on your door?
Yeah.
And was this person a professional interviewer who was paid to do that interview? It's really hard. It's hard to figure these things out. One of the things I've heard as well is some people requesting that you have to put a mirror behind you on remote interviews, and so like to see what I'm looking at. So
What
is
you're
there someone
seeing.
behind my
Yeah.
screen? Is there a second computer there? Is someone feeding me answers? So it's not just seeing me; it's seeing what I see. Unless you bring people in the office, we're going to have to think of low tech solutions to figure this out.
Well, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think it's changed a little bit with people coming into the office more. So being interviewed in the office is becoming more and more a norm. But I agree. And with a lot of roles, there's really no way to circumvent it. But we talked about getting a lot of applicants. And one of the things that I'm always curious is obviously you're trying to eliminate some of these candidates that are not qualified. And you mentioned at the start that the biggest challenge is the skills mismatch. They'll apply
Yeah,
for it, but they have nowhere near the skills. And I think that's partly desperation. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but like if you're looking for work, you're going to try everything.
of course.
I think the other aspect is a little bit of training from career coaches saying you should apply for every job, right? Like if you have two or three of the skill sets, you should apply. And people
Yeah.
are taking that advice at heart and kind of playing the numbers game in that way as well. But like for some roles, you need hard credentials. And I think what drives me just complete bonkers is I'm hiring a dental hygienist, you apply and you don't have a dental hygienist license. Like,
Yeah.
do you think verifying credentials in the application process is something that we'll see more and more as well?
I mean, for our roles, there's very few roles which require
Yeah.
credentials. Other than some accounting roles and a few engineer roles which require someone to have an actual, like have an engineering degree. Other than that, it's more again like skill and experience based.
Yeah.
However, for those fields, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for them to solve, and preferably up the pipeline as soon as possible. Like, how do you actually validate that? And I think there's an opportunity there, to have that again, whether it's you need a certain license, you need a certain certificate. That has to be validated before
Yeah.
you can even apply. Some sort of third party validation to say, yes, this person is who they say they are, they have these credentials, and before you even can press the apply button. But it's not something ideal, but I think for people who do, I think that's going to be a real big challenge.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. And it really depends. I think a lot of folks will mention there's a difference between what I call stand up jobs. There's still a challenge with getting enough applicants compared to sit down jobs, more white collar type roles where they're just getting it in overabundance. So, how do you manage that? How do you get to a point that you can manage it with, like, let's be real about it, less recruiters? You
Yeah.
don't have the same bandwidth in most talent acquisition departments, and the appetite to grow talent acquisition departments and budgets have not been there. So you have less recruiters dealing with more candidates, and then on the flip side, if they're hiring two sides, they're struggling getting some candidates. So it's like, I don't know what's worse though. Is it more challenging to go find candidates that are not applying to your jobs, or is it harder to go through thousands of applicants and them not be qualified?
I know it is. It's a double edge, right? I
Yeah.
think one of the things which has helped us out is also we limit the number of open jobs per recruiter,
Yeah.
and I
What's
think
what's
that,
your standard? How many recs does a recruiter?
yeah. So, so for basic jobs, we look at 10. So per
10.
recruiter,
Yeah.
10 open jobs. We built some flexibility in that because 10 jobs are not the same. You can't do 10
No.
director jobs the same as you can do 10 warehouse associates.
Yeah.
And so we got a couple of things to factor in there. So let's say you have multiple headcount on the same job, you could do more than that number. Let's say it's a really senior role, or it's a new hiring manager, or it's a really hard market. That's going to reduce. So you might have doing three really senior roles, and someone else might have 15 warehouse associates. But
Mm.
the average is 10, and our goals be less than that because that's kind of redlining. But what we found is putting that hard cap in place. The recruiters had time to actually go through and do the proper work up
Yeah.
front, really get a deep intake, do good interview plans, work with the hiring managers. And so that reduced the time to hire, that improved the quality. Then we have a CSAT score for our hiring managers, that increased. Our time to hire decreased. Our candidate CSAT, that also increased. And those are the metrics I look at. Like those
Mm.
three things are the things I really care about. And so we found that helps a lot. But I think right now, as a TA leader, you're constantly navigating really uncertain waters between technology, between labor market, between a lot of different things. And so you're constantly adjusting. Okay, what's next? What does this look like? And it's been this way for, I mean, it's always been this way, but it's been
Yeah.
more uncharted territory than ever before, I'd say.
I agree. I think it's, especially the last couple of years, we've seen that become more challenging than it ever has. You mentioned some KPIs. I'm curious, what are the key KPIs that you measure? And is there, quality of hire is a weird one because it's a really challenging one to measure. Do you guys even look at quality of hire?
I don't. I
No.
don't measure it. I see. So again, I look at hiring manager CSAT score, and then I look at candidate CSAT score. We send a survey out to every candidate, whether you interview with us or not, when the
Okay.
process is over, and I look at time to hire. And so those are my three indicators. And if somebody's off on that, that's a bit of like a warning light. Then I got to do a deep dive, and there can be a reason why. Hey, this
Yeah.
makes sense. We dropped the ball, or something else happened. But quality of hire, I would argue, is more of a hiring manager metric than a TA metric because we don't make the decision. I look at TA very
Mhm.
much similar to like a two-meter realtor. We provide you options, viable options based on your requirements. But if your
Mhm.
requirements aren't realistic, so if you say, hey, Vancouver's a crazy housing market. If you say, hey, I want to buy a $500,000 house, but that doesn't exist. They're $2 million and up. And say, okay, well, I'll just wait until I find one because that's what hiring managers do. Say, okay, well, just keep it open. We'll just keep looking. We'll get one. I'll know when I see it. It's like that doesn't exist. And so
Doesn't
that's
exist.
not my metric. That's your metric. That's you being unrealistic. And ultimately, the decision, like we can make recommendations, we can share what the market is. We're there to advise you. But similar to buying a house, we don't buy it. It's not our house. You make the hiring decision. And so there is parts which is TA related. So I know I'm making this oversimplified, but
No, I
I do
agree.
think more of a hiring manager metric than a TA metric.
I've said that many times. At the end of the day, we're just leading them to the water, and they have
There
to
you
make the
go.
right decisions. Because obviously, the accountability on hiring is not on us, and I don't think it should ever be. I don't think it's talent acquisition's role to make that hiring decision. At the end of the day, you mentioned at the start that the next 5 years, one of the biggest challenges is going to be to figure out, like, how do we get to a point that we're hiring real people. We've got
Yeah.
actual candidates that are qualified for the job. What else do you see in the next 5 years? Like, if we looked at 2030, what is this landscape going to look like?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of hype for AI, but I think there's actually a lot of more substance in automation. I think we'll
Yeah.
see a lot more automated steps and a lot more thoughtful processes built in, which automate things. I think you get more controllable bang for your buck realistically in the next couple of years, focusing on automation than focusing on AI. Chad Sowash of our friend over at Chad and Cheese, he calls it, he's like, AI right now is like the puppy dog phase where it's going to pee on your carpet. It's going to make some
Yeah.
mistakes. And I think that's the case. I mean, unless you're really patient and willing to deal with a puppy, you're probably going to focus on automation more than AI until we can actually buy full grown dogs which are trained and don't bite you and don't cause problems. So, but I think technology is going to change a lot. I think we're going to really look at verification as being a big thing. Am I
Yeah.
hiring who I think I'm hiring? What does that look like? Not background checks. I think those are most often pointless, but I think we'll see tools and technology out there to really do better verification steps. I mean, there was talks that when blockchain was at its kind of hype phase, there'd be this blockchain solution, you have this resume on blockchain or references or other things. That never really materialized that I've seen, but I think
No, it
verification is a
hasn't.
big
It's
move.
actually how Resume Wallet started. That was the
Yeah.
key thing that we were trying to fix, right? And there's a couple of factors that has made it almost impossible. First of all, how do you monetize the blockchain? Is through crypto. Do you think you can charge HR on crypto? And plus,
Yeah.
there's many
There's,
other challenges. But I asked someone that's very well versed in the world of AI and technology, and I'm like, okay, if you took where we are in AI right now, how would you compare that to when the internet came out? Like, what year would you kind of correlate it? And they said 1996. So
okay.
you're around my age. You would know in 1996, the
Yeah.
internet was very at
Mostly
its
dial
early,
up, mostly dial up, and like
all dial
a
up, like
and the noise that come on.
dial up,
Yeah,
some very bad websites. So I think you're right. I think AI is very much in a phase that we're building the infrastructure for it to be very successful in the future, but it's not there yet.
that's a great analog. I think that's very spot on. I've thought similar. A friend of mine asked to speak to a high school we went to. He's actually a teacher there, and he's like, "Hey, talk about what's gonna happen in the future for jobs." I'm like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I said, this is as big of a shift as when I was graduating high school and the internet was just becoming a thing. I was,
Yeah.
very similar. Like I said, 97, I graduated in 97. So very early ages, the internet wasn't, you couldn't apply for a job online. You couldn't do anything
No,
online. And I was like, AI is the same thing. Like, I think it's gonna be quicker. I think the
it will be
maturation
quicker.
of this
Yeah.
will be even faster.
But I think what we saw is obviously we saw the WorldComs of the world, everyone that built the infrastructure for the internet go in a really rough phase. But thank God that infrastructure was built because we've relied on it ever since, right?
Yeah.
I want to do a fun part of our show. I want to do a little bit of what I call a rapid fire on questions, especially
Okay.
in this sector. So, what's your favorite book, either on perspective of business or HR, that you've read that you would recommend to people listening to this?
I can't give you one. I'm gonna give you three.
Give me three.
Okay. Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. This
Fantastic.
is this is the best book. The chapter on hiring executives is incredible, but the whole book on just running a business and realizing that it is not easy. And you're constantly being challenged by things you don't expect. Uh, Rework by Jason Fried
Oh,
challenges a lot of status quo, a lot of unconventional thinking. His blog and other things are also really good. Agree or disagree with him, he just makes you think. And so
mm,
Rework is great. Jason Fried. Powerful by Patty McCord, talking about the Netflix culture. When I look at modern HR, it's not happy, feel good. We're not paid by smiles. Like we're trying to have performance of the company, and I think Netflix has just codified that so well, and that book does a great job. So that was my three. Those are like just three must reads.
thank you, because I've read Ben Horowitz's book, but as far as the other two, I have not. So I will check
Oh,
them
there you
out.
go. Nice.
What's your favorite podcast series in this space?
All right, I'm not just saying this because I miss Recruitment Flex. I'll be honest, that's why I'm so glad we're back together. So I'm glad to see 5 years later. But you know, a big fan of Chan Cheese. I mean, when it comes
Yeah,
to HR recruitment, those guys are great. Love seeing stuff Purple Acorn's putting out right now as far as the content those guys are sharing is
they're
also like
pretty
out of
cool.
nowhere. Really cool. Like they're fun. They're doing it's just it's great. It's got energy to it. So it's really cool. On the non-HR type side, How I Built This, which is on NPR by Guy Raz.
Yes.
I love that. I love hearing the stories of founders and the challenges they overcame. And it's a thoughtful, like conversation, which I enjoy the pacing of it. Like it gives you time to think. You can tell it's just not just jam packed full of fluff. And so I like that. I'm a big fan of how I built this.
Have you ever checked Acquired?
No, I
Love
feel like I
it.
should now.
Very
Okay.
similar. It tells a story of some of the biggest acquisitions that have happened in the world of business. Fantastic. Another one that I love that I say to everyone is the All In podcast with like a bunch of billionaires in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Some people like it, some people don't. I think it's pretty good.
I like Business Wars. I think Business Wars is entertaining. I mean,
Yeah,
it's almost like listening to it's not a sitcom, but like
it's
it's
an
also,
audiobook.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun. It's a fun listen to if I'm just looking for, hearing about some of the conflict in the business world out there and things that have happened.
Well, I think that's the one where they had a really long series about RIM BlackBerry against
Yeah,
Apple, and I thought that was just fascinating of how it actually worked inside RIM, what they were trying to do. And there's a movie that was done around it here in Canada. I
oh,
don't know if
interesting.
it's widespread. I forget what it's
Now,
called.
I'm not a Swiftie, but I know you have girls. The Taylor Swift one on Business Wars is actually really interesting.
I did not see that.
And I mean, I'm not cool. I don't listen to any music, but like, and I don't even know any Taylor Swift songs. But hearing
I know
the
them all.
business side of this and how like the battle for her catalog and everything else,
Mm.
her re-releases, really interesting behind the scenes of what she did. Is so she's obviously incredible musician, pop star, but she's also a savvy business person, which is pretty
Oh,
neat.
she's a killer
Yeah,
businesswoman. Absolutely. I agree on that end. I have so much respect for what she's built on that end. This was a lot of fun, Bradley. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way?
you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to geek out, reach out to me. This is stuff I love, so I welcome any invites. And
Any parting words? One thing that everyone listening should remember or take away.
yeah, I think, so one of the things I look at talent acquisition is there's always going to be challenges. However, I think too often people in HR or talent acquisition focus on the symptoms and not the problems of those challenges. And I think I'd challenge people to do is really dive deep into the root cause and make that fun. Make that, I need to solve this and figure this out, because whatever we're facing, there's going to be something next. Once you get through that, it's going to be the next problem, the next challenge. The market's going to shift. This technology is going to change. Don't look at just at a symptom level. Dive in deep. What is driving this, and how do I actually really try to find a meaningful solution to make this better? And I think that's where industry needs to go and practitioners need to go. I'm striving to get there. Again, it's a journey, but this is where I'm really focused on.
I think that's great advice for whatever type of profession you're in. So thank you, Bradley. That was really good. Appreciate you coming on. And for everyone listening, I appreciate you listening to the Quality Conversation by Resume Wallet.